All right, TVO kids, who is the first Canadian to walk in space?
Chris Hadfield!
And who is the first Canadian commander of the International Space Station?
Chris Hadfield!
And who is the first Canadian commander of the International Space Station to be here with us in the space?
Chris Hadfield!
A big warm round of applause, everyone, for Chris Hadfield! Colonel Chris Hadfield, we are so honored to have you here.
It is so nice to be here with everybody. Thanks for inviting me.
Are we all over the moon that Chris Hadfield is here?
Yeah!
We're going to get to an email, if that's okay.
I'm ready.
We received over 600, which is amazing. This one is from Charles from Markham. What is life like on the International Space Station?
Charles, on the International Space Station, life is busy. There's actually the schedule on our computer, and there's a red line that moves across the schedule that shows you what you're supposed to have done, and it tells you every single thing you're supposed to do every 5 minutes for the whole 5 months that you're up there. So like you're watching this thing go by and okay, 15 minutes from now I got to do that. An hour from now I got to do that. And if you get behind, then it's the wrong color on the other side of the red line. You got to try and catch up. So you always know what you're supposed to be doing. And there's 200 experiments on board. You have to fix things when you break. You want to take pictures of the world. You want to phone your family. It's a busy place to be.
Are you ready? Go ahead, Giselle.
How do you brush your teeth and go to the bathroom in space?
That's a burning question from a lot of
Yeah, how do you, well, brushing your teeth, we'll start with that. It's not that much different. In fact, I brought regular toothpaste up with me and a regular toothbrush. So I normally brush my teeth in the morning and then in the evening, before I go to bed and when I wake up. And so I would take my toothbrush and it would be Velcroed to the wall. So pull it off the wall. Now I have my toothpaste, or my toothbrush, and then I had a little bag of water, like in this video, and I would take a little bag of water and just squirt a tiny bit of water onto my toothbrush, and then I would take my toothpaste and squirt it on top. You see the toothbrush is wet. Squirt it on top of the toothpaste or the toothbrush like that. Not too much. And then once I get the right amount, then I would close up the toothpaste, Velcro it back to the wall, and then start brushing my teeth. I'd brush my teeth, you know, like if you sort of hum Happy Birthday to yourself, that's about how long you should brush your teeth. And get the teeth in the back. And then I get all my teeth. And now I've got a dirty toothbrush and a mouthful of toothpaste. So on Earth, what you'd do probably is spit your toothpaste into the sink and then rinse your toothbrush. But we don't have very much water on the spaceship. So to clean my toothbrush, I just go and sort of suck all the remaining toothpaste out of it, and then it's pretty clean. And then I just Velcro it back on the wall. But now I got a mouthful of stuff, so I could either spit it into a cloth, but now I've got a dirty, toothpastey cloth, and what are you going to do with that on a space station? So instead, I just swallowed my toothpaste every day. And it's not great, but it's not poisonous. Otherwise, they wouldn't let you brush your teeth with it. So that way I kept the cloth clean, and then I just a little squirt of water, clean off my toothbrush, rinse my mouth, and I came home with no cavities.
Wow.
But the other half of the question was, how do you go to the bathroom? And the toilet is a lot like a toilet on Earth, except instead of gravity pulling everything away from your body, it's wind and air. The toilet has air pulled down into it. So everything that comes out of your body gets pulled down into the toilet using airflow. It's a little bit drafty sitting up there, but that's what a toilet looks like. And that's a lady named Sunny Williams is showing us how to use the toilet on the space station. And you seal it up so it doesn't smell. And then that tube up here is what you pee into. In fact, that yellow tube is what you pee into. And what's weird is your pee goes down and into a sewage system, and then they mix that with the humidity and everything else, and then they purify it and run it through filters and clean it up, and then the next day you drink it. But so long as it gets purified properly, then water is water, right? And so long as it comes out perfectly clean and clear, you don't really ask where this water was a week ago or 100 years ago, because 100 years ago this water could have been anywhere. And I bet you 75 million years ago this water used to be dinosaur pee. So long as you have a good enough filter, it just turns back into water. And on the space station, we have a really good filter.
Where's McKenna?
Out of all your most memorable experiences in outer space, which one is your most favorite and why?
What's my most favorite and memorable experience in space? McKenna, there was one day on my second space flight where I got to go outside. Imagine if you'd spent your whole life inside, and one day you get to go outside. And when you go outside, you don't just walk out a door, but you put on a big protective suit, and then you grab on to both sides of the hatch and pull yourself out into weightlessness. And then when you get out there, you're floating weightless in space. And when you know, holding on with one hand, but when you look over to one side, you're not standing on the world looking up. The world is there turning beside you. You're going through the universe with the world. And when you look the other way, it's the whole universe right there, endless, bottomless, and you're in between those two. To me, of all of the memorable things, or the experiences I've had in space, that was the most magical one. That was the one that was the most fun.
Hello, Nikki, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your question for Chris Hadfield?
What? Does music sound different on the space station?
Does music sound different?
Does music sound different on the space station? Nick, I'm a musician. I've played guitar and I play trombone and I sing. I've been singing and playing my whole life. And so there's music on the space station. I played music on the space station. You've probably seen some of it, but I also wrote music up there. I played the guitar pretty much every night and sang. And the music sounds about the same, but the difference is it's noisy on a space station. There's all the fans running and the pumps running. So it's sort of like playing music inside the back of a school bus or maybe inside a really loud machine, you know, maybe next to a lawnmower or something, because it's noisy. So you're trying to play music, but it's a loud place, just because you need all that machinery to keep you alive, to purify the air. So the music sounds about the same. Sound waves aren't affected by gravity, but it's just a noisy place. And so you want to have earplugs or earphones or something to truly listen to music on a spaceship.
We have Jade with a question right into the microphone for Chris.
Can you paint in space?
Oh, can you paint in space? You know, I brought along a little tiny paint set. A friend of mine he draws books. His name's Peter Reynolds. He did The Dot and a bunch of other books for young people. And he sent me along with a tiny little paint set, just a tiny little paintbrush. And some of those little paints that if you put a little water on them, then they're like dry powder, but you put some water on them, then you have some color. So I did do a tiny little bit of painting up there. But a lot of paint you can't, because if you think about it, a lot of paint has a strong smell to it. A lot of paint sort of stinks when you open it up. And here on Earth, the stink has a long way to go. But in a space station, there's nowhere for the stink to go. And in fact, where most of those stinks go is you breathe them, and your lungs become the filter of all of those strong smells. And after a while, that's really unhealthy for you. So we try not to bring stuff up to the space station that has a really strong smell to it. And that includes most paint. So you can just bring a tiny bit of paint up with you.
We have Nicole, I believe, on the phone with another question. Hi, Nicole.
Yes?
Hi, Nicole. What's your question for Chris?
How did you feel when you first got into space?
Ooh, good question.
I like that. How did I feel when I first got into space? I was excited. I was a little bit nervous because I'd never been there before. But mostly the biggest emotion up there was being relieved. Like, at last. I've been dreaming of this for years and years and years. It's really, really hard to be an astronaut and to fly a spaceship. And it's probably never going to happen. So when that day comes and you ride your rocket ship and it manages to make it all the way up through the atmosphere and get going fast enough, the biggest emotion when you get there is one of, yes, we're actually finally here. And the adventure is really beginning. So I think I felt all of those things, but the biggest emotion that I had was one of joyous relief.
Fair enough. Okay, we have Yakira with a question. Go for it.
How is living in space different than living on Earth?
How is living in space different than living on Earth? Let's see. The biggest difference maybe is knowing that you are far away from everybody else and you can't change that. Imagine if you were with a group of maybe 2 friends, just 3 of you, and you were completely isolated from everybody else for 6 months or 5 months. It kind of changes how you think about things. You know, who do you count on? Who are you going to go ask a question of? If you get a toothache, who's going to fix it? If you get a little bit concerned about something, who are you going to talk to? So that group of people, they become not just your family, but they become everybody for you. And you really feel quite separate and different. But at the same time, if you go over to the window and look, the whole world is pouring by underneath. And so it's kind of comforting. Earth isn't too far away. Earth is like a giant mother, just you can't go give her a hug. That's all.
And there's a follow-up question that you had as well.
Where would you like to be and why?
Where would I like to be and why? To be an astronaut, I had to live all around the world, and even off the world. I had to live where all of our simulators are to train and prepare. So I lived in the United States, I lived in Japan, I lived in Russia, I lived in Europe. But the place I really wanted to be was back in Canada, actually. It's really nice. That's where I grew up. It's where I feel at home. It's where I feel comforted. It's nice to be back in Canada. We take good care of each other. And I think if I had any place in Canada that I could be, it would be with my family at our cottage, because we have a little cottage that we go to in the summer. And to me, that's one of the most special places, not even just on Earth, but one of the most special places that there is.
Okay, we have another interesting question from Ashan.
If there was one thing you could redo in your career, what would it be and why?
If there was one thing I could redo in my career, what would it be and why? That's an interesting question. I've had several careers. I was a CF-18 pilot. I used to defend all of North America against invading aircraft. I was a test pilot, and I was a downhill ski instructor for a lot of years as well. And I was an astronaut for a lot of years. So I've had more than one career. If there's one thing I could do, what would I change and why? I think I would go back to when I was a ski instructor. And I used to teach skiing full-time and part-time. And I think I would ski more. Because skiing, it's a lot, you can think about it. Skiing can be sort of like work if you're an instructor. You work with the students, you're training them, you're focusing on it, you're thinking about making them a better skier. But did you actually just go have fun skiing yourself? Did you actually remember to enjoy why you're there? And I think if I had a chance to go back and do one of the things that I used to do for my job, I think I would just love skiing more and maybe do a little less serious teaching.
My name is Leah, and who or what was your inspiration to become an astronaut?
Leah, thank you. Who or what was my inspiration to become an astronaut? The very first two people to walk on the moon, their names were Neil and Aldrin. Everybody called him Buzz. So Neil and Buzz. It was Edwin Aldrin was his name. Neil and Buzz were the first two people to walk on the moon. And, up until that day, it had been impossible to walk on the moon. And yet, by the time night came, those people had not only walked on the moon, but they'd gone back into their spaceship and gone to sleep. For the first time in history, we not only walked on the moon, we were sleeping on the moon. And to me, I just thought, that's incredible. In one day, something absolutely new happened. And it didn't happen because it had to. It happened because it just barely could. And that was really exciting for me. And that inspired me to want to fly in space. And it inspired me to do most of the things I did in my life. Just that one day of the first two people walking and sleeping on the moon.
Hi, I'm Amir, and I was wondering, were there any problems in space that you thought you might not be able to come home?
Amir, the reality of doing something new that's hard is that things always go wrong. Always. Every single day things go wrong. And if they really seriously go wrong, then are you going to be able to come home? That's a serious question. On my very first flight, we were trying to dock and build a space station, and our systems were all, like our sensors were all failing, and we didn't even know if we were going to be able to dock or not. And imagine, maybe worse than not being able to come home, imagine having to come home and completely having failed at your space flight. That would be a pretty bad feeling. And then on my third space flight, just before we were coming home, 4 days before we were coming home, the space station sprang a big leak of its main cooling system, which was ammonia. A big leak, really serious, that would have threatened the whole health of the whole space station. And we had to do an emergency spacewalk on 1 day's notice to go outside and try and take off the big leaking section and install a new one and stop the leak. Otherwise, we probably couldn't have come home for a while. So things go wrong all the time. And the key is, how do you get ready for things going wrong? That's the only way to go through life. Don't get ready for things to go right. Get ready for things to go wrong.
My name is Hiba, and did you feel sick when you returned back to Earth?
Well, I felt so sick when I came back because I hadn't been used to lifting up my own arms. Suddenly I felt weak and old, and I couldn't balance properly because I hadn't had gravity to remind me which way was up for 5 months. And so I felt weak and tired and dizzy as could be. And when you're weak and tired and dizzy, sometimes it just makes you just want to lie down and throw up, or throw up and lie down. That's all I wanted to do. I just felt terrible. And after a while, I did both of those things. I eventually threw up, and then I lied down, and then I was okay. But yeah, it takes a while for your body to adapt when you come home from space.
Well, now we know you're a human and not a robot, right, Chris?
That's for sure.
One more question.
My name's Tabitha, and my question is, what is your greatest fear when you went to space?
Tabitha, nobody really wants an astronaut who's afraid, because probably the astronaut is afraid because she doesn't know what she's going to do next. That's normally why you're afraid. I don't know what makes you afraid, Tabitha, but for me it's when I don't know what to do, or when I think I'm going to make a mistake. And you don't want astronauts who are like that. So we practice and get ready over and over and over again. So it's only the things that I didn't think I could control that made me afraid. And what that was for me was my family back on Earth. Actually, I was most afraid that one of my kids or my wife would get sick, or maybe even worse, maybe somebody in my family might die while I was in space. And while I was on the space station, one of my crewmates, his name is Tom, his mom died while we were on the space station. We couldn't come home. He had to do everything, just by phoning his family, talking to his brothers and sisters. I mean, it was a pretty terrible thing. And that's what I feared the most, that somebody in my family would be sick or die while I was in space. Not for me, but I was afraid for my family.
Colonel Chris Hadfield, I'm sorry that was the last question, unfortunately, but thank you so much for being here. Did you guys enjoy it?
Yeah!
Excellent.